Hello, welcome to our program. So we have on the program today in the studio Representative Rene Oliveira, District 37. Welcome to the program, Rene. Glad to have you back.
Thank you, Ron.
Now, we're going to talk about the stimulus package that the Obama administration is moving through Congress, putting out dollars to try and stimulate infrastructure, jobs, help the economy. And we're trying to make the case here today that the flood control necessities, completing the third dam between Laredo and Eagle Pass, building the levees up to Category 4 or 5 storm capability, and those kinds of issues are critically important. Now, Renee is going to help you and I understand more about what's happening up in Austin during this session of the Texas Legislature, the 81st session. Oliveira says the scene for the 81st legislative session is going to be tough. That's his story, 3-page story in the Rio Grande Guardian. We'll talk about that later on. Let's first of all put Barack Obama, the President of the United States, up on the screen. So the President of the United States tells me one-on-one while he's running and asking for votes in the state of Texas, going into the November general election, that he would make sure that the Rio Grande River Delta, Brownsville, all the way to El Paso, build those levees up to handle a Category 4 or 5 storm. That's important to protect not only the maquiladoras, but also the assets that FEMA would have to come in and make right to the tune of many, many billions of dollars if they were to be harmed in some way by a storm.
There's no doubt. Every dam that has been built historically was always a great investment. The water that was saved and retained for use, the electricity that could be generated by a dam, all throughout history. These kinds of investments were what made our country great and what has done a lot. If we did not have the dam up around Starr County and Zapata County, we'd have bigger problems. And I would echo something else. I think that if we can ever do the Weir Dam or some project like that, to gain
There's a Weir
water.
Dam in the pipeline, not only in Laredo, but in Brownsville,
Yes.
because that retains water that otherwise may go out into the Gulf of Mexico.
We lose millions of acre feet of water all the time into the Gulf, and frankly, it's a shame that water is not being saved and accumulated. Water is life, water is growth. We've got to conserve and save it every way we can.
And you know, Renee, the first dam built was Falcon Dam, and that dam, had it not been built, Hurricane Alice, her floodwaters, which destroyed a bridge in Eagle Pass, destroyed 2 bridges in Laredo because the dam was below those communities. That would shut down the maquilas in those communities that operate to this very day. And so there needs to be something between Laredo and Eagle Pass, not only to save those maquilas, but to provide water supply for the region all the way from there to Brownsville, because that region had $1 billion in economic loss, according to Susan Combs, when she's Ag Commissioner, by virtue we didn't have that water that Mexico was not delivering during the Mexican water debt crisis.
The water debt crisis, fortunately, has been addressed, but the safety issue that you've talked about hasn't. When there was major flooding up in along the border north of Laredo, going up to Presidio and places like that, you're right. FEMA has to come in and pay for that. Right now, we're estimating Texas losses for Hurricane Ike and Dolly close to $15 billion. We will get reimbursed for some of that from FEMA, but not all of it. If you don't do these kinds of things now, build the dams, build the levees, we're going to be spending a lot more later. People have to look at these expenditures when they're looking at these coming from the stimulus package as true investments, and the kind of investments that pay off, for a century or two later. So there's going to be a lot of good things in President Obama's package that we need to fight and see that we get our fair share in Texas.
Tell us about your comments in the Rio Grande Guardian story, how tough it is during this legislative session. The people need to know, because it's going to affect their jobs, their neighbors' jobs, their families' jobs, their communities' economic situation, because we're looking at Austin and Washington, D.C. during the next biennium, next 18 months at least, to try to hopefully help us or hurt us. And is this session in the Austin going to hurt us or help us?
I think we're going to eventually come out okay. The problem we have is we got to go back a little bit. If you went back to May of '08, our then Speaker, Tom Craddock, told the state of Texas that we were going to have a $15 billion surplus. Well, he was very wrong. The surplus is $9 billion, and in actuality, we are short of the money we need to meet current funding levels. So our fight in Austin is going to be to try to deal with commitments that have already been made that will bind this particular session. One is a commitment that was made to the people for $3 billion in property tax relief. So out of that $9 billion, $3 billion is gone for that.
And that was $3 million that
$3 billion.
$3 billion that Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst made sure was set aside, and he's kind of the hero in this particular regard in this session because he made sure that happened during the last legislative session, that those dollars were put aside.
Well, I would certainly give Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst and other members of the House and Senate due credit for that.
Now, there's some talk about using the rainy day fund, which has over $6.7 billion in it, and that might, when you put together with the $2.1 billion in unspent funds that you just talked about, that gets it up almost to the 10.5% that Susan Coleman is talking about. That would wipe out what you now have as a surplus, and it would wipe out the rainy day fund. So Judith Zaffirini, the senator from Laredo, tells the media in Austin that she thinks there's never been a rainy day. Now's the rainy day over the next 2 years, and now's the time to use that rainy day money. Where do you stand when she's championing at the Capitol the use of this rainy day fund to try and keep the state somewhat afloat and services at the level that they're at now?
Well, ever since our comptroller came out with this surprisingly low estimate of revenue available to us, I've been advocating we need to tap the rainy day fund. It's real simple. We're in the greatest recession since the last depression. We had Hurricane Ike and Dolly devastate Texas, particularly Hurricane Ike. There literally and figuratively you've got a rainy day. We've had problems along the border with possible, once we've had some vessel devaluation and there's risk of more, and you can go on and on and on and down the list of things that have impacted Texas. So attending to the rainy day fund, getting some of that money is going to be needed. Now, the only other thing that will save this budget from being a budget of cuts is going to be the federal stimulus package that President Obama and Congress is working on. And we're hoping that that will fill some of the gaps, particularly in transportation, infrastructure, education, and even in health care.
Now, we talked to Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State for the Obama administration, when she was running for the presidency. She understands the importance of I-69. Here's what she said, even somewhat Clinton-esque, but this is what she told me.
I've put forth a very specific plan to rebuild America, and that includes our roads and our bridges and our tunnels and our ports. Because if we don't start investing in our infrastructure, we cannot make our economy produce the jobs and the opportunities that it should. So I will certainly look at that highway, but I want to have a comprehensive approach to rebuilding America.
So now Hillary Clinton, who told me what you just saw, just appeared some time ago when she was going through the confirmation process of the U.S. Senate, that the Obama administration is going to be focusing internationally on Canada to the north, I-69, Mexico to the south, I-69, connecting those two because Canada is the #1 trading partner for the country. Mexico, the #3 trading partner for the country. Very important because we have no interstates that are going northwest, northeast to southwest, so to speak, like I-69 that you're now seeing on your screen. So the Obama administration, very impressed with how important Mexico is, third trading partner, get a lot of energy from Mexico. Canada, #1 trading partner, getting a lot of energy from Canada. I-69 right in there needs to be fast-tracked, Renee.
There's no doubt about it. And that's where we're hoping the federal dollars will come in the stimulus package. There's some indications it'll be there to get this back on a fast track because it's frankly been slowed down quite a bit.
During the Bush administration.
It has been. And the other problem has been our own Department of Transportation frankly has not done a good job, and we are behind in many projects, and part of it is lack of funding. So with us turning to the rainy day fund, us having a small surplus, it's insufficient to fund transportation. We're going to need an injection of federal dollars to get that project going, and that ties into the whole international buffeting that Texas is getting. We have had too many leaders for too long say it's been a negligible effect. In fact, Governor Perry did an op-ed piece a while back that said we don't need stimulus dollars. Well, now he's subsequently, to his credit, changed his mind. But that has been bad for us because there is a feeling out there in various communities and circles that we haven't been hit by this recession. We have been hit in more ways than one. Texas is very much part of the global economy. We are a massive exporter. If foreign countries aren't buying, Texas companies aren't selling. So we're getting hit by this from the problems with the three major automobile plants, that impacting the maquiladoras from El Paso to Laredo to Brownsville, the lack of the transportation we need on I-69, the global economy, and this recession. It is hitting Texas, and it is hitting Texas much harder than many of our leaders have led us to believe.
Do you think that our U.S. Senators, Cornyn and Hutchinson, really understand how much the state of Texas, especially Interstate 10 southern half of the Lone Star State, really needs these stimulus dollars? Here's what Cornyn recently told a group of border residents. Hurricane assistance and flood control remain top concerns along the border, and ensuring the local communities get their fair share of federal assistance to address these issues and others is a responsibility that he takes very seriously. Now, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, in the picture you see before you now, had a meeting with the trade representative for the United States of America, former mayor of Dallas, Ron Kirk, who is going to be working on improving the relations with Mexico and with Canada, as we discussed earlier in the program. Here's what Ron Kirk told me while running for the U.S. Senate about his awareness of how important completion and fast tracking of Interstate 69, the interstate and national highway, really is.
Ron, we absolutely need to address the need for a major interstate highway. As you all know, this is one of the fastest growing counties and metropolitan areas in the country. It's an issue that I have been familiar with and working on for a number of years. When I was first elected mayor of Dallas, we became a partnership of a group that was trying to get highway funding for that entire NAFTA corridor from I-35 to I-69. I've worked with the mayors of Laredo and the mayors of Guadalajara and literally mayors in Canada trying to advance that goal, and I would continue to do that.
So we got Ron Kirk in the driver's seat, the trade representative, working on how to improve the relations, according to Hillary, during confirmation between Canada, United States, and Mexico, all three communities back in the saddle again.
We're certainly on the radar screen, and that's normally wouldn't be, we wouldn't be getting the attention that I believe we're going to get from Secretary Clinton, President Obama, all of the people you mentioned. Strong Texas ties. Secretary Clinton knows the border, knows South Texas, and is going to be there to help us. I think the most interesting thing will be and is what our new ambassador to Mexico will be doing with Secretary Clinton, and what we can see in terms of economic development along the whole border region. It's a good group of people that will, I believe, not let South Texas or the border region down.
Renee, a lot of contention going on at the state capitol on the day that the session began, the 81st session. All the fireworks moved from the House, where Joe Strauss was elected with a lot of support on the Democratic side to be the Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives. And all the fireworks moved over to Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst's domain over in the Senate side, which is normally very accommodating, very collegial. A lot of partisan bloodletting, for goodness sake.
Oh, it is. It's been a big surprise the way the session started and continues. The Texas
Republicans
Senate
concerned because they've lost some clout with Craddock going out. The partisanship has moved out of the House by virtue of Strauss being basically put in the Speaker's chair by Democrat votes.
There are some 50 some odd House Republicans that feel they've been disenfranchised. They're giving Speaker Strauss a bit of a honeymoon But as time goes by, I think Speaker Strauss is going to recognize that his core group of support, at least at this time, is primarily Democrats and probably maybe 20, 25 Republicans. But we're ready to work in a bipartisan way in the House. We have not been able to do that the last 3 sessions when Tom Craddock was Speaker. It was one way, and it was his way.
Or the highway.
And exactly, and we were divided along the aisle like Washington, which people don't want us to be. Now, unfortunately, we've now gotten over that in the House, and we're working together in a bipartisan way. But the Texas Senate, which has always been, as you said, accommodating, respectful,
bipartisan,
a lady and gentleman's club, started with some of the bitterest fighting I've ever seen. And that is still going on.
The Dean Lady of the Senate, Judith Zaffirini, represents Laredo, parts of the Valley, and the Corpus Christi region. She says the Senate has set a bitter and partisan tone for what we optimistically thought would be a great session. This is terrible, a terrible mistake. The majority may prevail today, but the majority is not always right.
It was well stated and well said, and some of that bitterness is carried through the session as we've gone along.
And it all happened over the fighting over the 2/3 rule because the Republican majority trying to cram down a bill through the process to provide voter registration, which your party is of the opinion disenfranchises senior citizens and minority group members.
Well, it's calling for everyone having to have a voter ID or an ID. Now, from the vast majority of Texans, that's not a problem. But I had a great aunt who, for 10 years, we couldn't get her a driver's license, even though she had been born and raised in the United States of America, even though she had been married to a veteran of World War II. For some people, the elderly and the poor, identification is still an issue. The real deal here is there is no big voter fraud or big problem. This is a make-believe solution for a make-believe problem.
Is the Republican majority in the Senate, with their vote, limiting 2/3 rule, trying to get voter ID, trying to keep some senior citizens, some minority group members from voting in the numbers they've traditionally been voting, and that would help Democrat Party candidates in the future?
I think that is one of the motives of some of my Republican colleagues. And it's disappointing because if you look at the data and the evidence, there is nothing to support that this is needed. We should be making it as easy as we can.
There are not a lot of Mexican nationals coming across with politicatas voting in U.S. side of the border.
In every election contest we've ever had, in every survey that's ever been done, in every audit that's ever been done, those allegations always come out, but when you look at the facts, it is a big rarity. So this will have a bigger deterrent on people voting and exercising their right to vote. Now, some people say, well, in Mexico you have to have an identification. Well, in Texas, everybody ought to be able to vote. Everybody that's eligible ought to be able to vote, and this is more of a barrier than a cure for anything.
You're not seeing on your screen some of the damage occurring in Galveston, where yours truly rode through the eye of Hurricane Ike. The city of Galveston, after all is said and done, determined that the billions of dollars that it had spent to try and get back in business, become a community once more, was bone dry, basically.
Well, what happened is nobody until recently realized the loss. I will give you credit particularly for riding out through two eyes, Hurricane Dolly as well. You showed great courage in giving us firsthand reporting that nobody else was doing. But the windstorm fund is what insures everything from Beaumont to Brownsville, all of Houston and Galveston, and frankly every school district in those areas as well.
So what's going to be done this session when you're looking at a potential 10% reduction in state funds coming in?
Well, I was hoping we were going to be injecting $1 or $2 billion of the alleged surplus that was we were told back in May of 2008 by Tom Craddock that it was going to be 15, but now we don't have any money for it. We are at risk of not having sufficient insurance and certainly having very high-cost insurance unless we get more money into this fund. All of the insurance companies contribute to this fund, but there are millions of Texans that are dependent on having their home, their business, their schools, their commercial properties covered by this fund. It is a very serious problem. After Katrina, the one in Louisiana was broke, and they're still trying to put it together. If they get hit by another storm, there's not the money there to pay the claims. Now, we have to make sure that doesn't happen in Texas.
Now, Ike had windstorm damage all through Texas because Ike not only skirted northwest or northeast Houston, all the way up just to the east of Dallas across the Red River.
In many ways, an argument can be made, except for the incredible loss of life that was felt under Katrina, that Ike was just as devastating. In terms of property damage, yes, in terms of property damage on the great swath, we can all remember that picture that the meteorologist put up showing how it was impacting almost the entire Gulf Coast. And it went inland too, and there was damage inland. We have to pray and hope that we won't be visited by any more major storms for a while, but if we are, we need to find a way to have that fund solvent to pay the claims that need to be paid, or insurance is going to become absolutely unaffordable.
Why should everyone who's listening into our conversation here today be concerned across the state of Texas as to whether or not this windstorm fund has money in it, especially if you live in West Texas? Why should you care?
Well, the reality of it is those claims are going to have to be paid by Texas and by FEMA. And if there's not money in that fund, the folks in El Paso and Amarillo, I mean, we pay for their tornado damage. We pay for their hail damage. We pay for the problems that they have. They will be paying for these problems too.
Last question for the program today, Renee, is all the squabbling and the lack of bipartisanship in the Texas Senate, this 81st session of the legislative body, going to have a potential adverse effect on the future political designs of Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst?
I think Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst and Governor Perry are going to be very wrapped up in their respective races. Governor Perry is going to face a very serious challenge from Senator Hutchison, and Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst for the United States Senate, if that's what he does, and indications are that's what he wants to do, it's going to taint a lot of decision making. Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, I believe, has been historically a very fair man and very fair to South Texas.
But his members may force him to move more to the other side.
His members and his Republican primary may force him to take some positions that heretofore we would not have seen.
So if the session doesn't go well, it could have an adverse effect on Perry and Dewhurst.
It could, and on Texas policy.
Wow.
If you're wrapped up in running for office, sometimes you make the political decision rather than the right decision.
Renee, thank you for coming and being with us.
Thank you, Ron.
On the program.
Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us. If you want to give us feedback, go to ronwhitlock.com and let us know what you think, maybe what you think we need to be covering in future editions of our program. Till next time, adios.